and then hope you understand what we are. Then after discussion, give them a minute each. Maybe give them a minute each. I hope online. Apruba, you can hear us?
Yes, sir. Crystal clear.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome for the second day as well, Prabha. So we will start the day and the session. Femi, over to you. The same 6 + 2 minutes.
Good morning, everybody. We'll start with our first session on Myanmar's internal politics and conflicts. Today we have 4 presentations. Before we begin, just a simple run through. You'll get 6 + 2 minutes for your presentation. 6 minutes, there will be an alarm. And then you'll have 2 minutes to wrap up. After that, we'll have a Q&A session where we'll have 2 to 3 rounds of questions asked, and then you'll answer them. So our first presentation is by Lily Susan. She's from Christianity College, and she'll be presenting on state of resistance in Myanmar and enduring struggle against the military dominance. We'll show her presentation.
Very good morning to one and all present here. I'm Leah Susan. I'm currently an undergrad student majoring in political science and sociology from Christianity College, Bangalore. I would first like to thank NIAS for this opportunity for helping me present my paper. My paper is titled State of Resistance in Myanmar, an Enduring Struggle Against the Military Dominance. So pretty much most of the topics were covered with day 1 sessions and lectures. This would be quite a generic paper where I would be discussing about the general specific issues and the future trajectory that can be followed. Let me go to the first slide. So the long-standing persistent struggle of Myanmar's people against military dominance definitely highlights and showcases the determination of a nation which is striving for democracy and justice. But despite all of this, Myanmar still faces significant obstacles from prolonged military violence and conflict to severe humanitarian crisis. While challenges of ethnic division, the urban-rural divide, and resource limitations further complicates a unified and sustainable resistance against military dominance. Well, looking forward, the pathway of Myanmar's resistance depends on overcoming the various ethnic divisions that are present to sustain unity by mobilizing resources to strengthen further, and most importantly, to facilitate mediation, to put a halt to the escalating violence that occurs and look ahead for an inclusive and democratic future where the voices of each individual, regardless of their ethnic divisions, they are heard. Well, I would like to focus the need for unity among the ethnic groups and international solidarity in determining the country's prospects for freedom and equality. Well, we all do know Myanmar has had to suffer, and they still go through violence and adversities from the military dominance. Well, the violence that is committed continues to be one of the most concerning factors in the nation's ongoing quest for democracy, not just in the nation, but the entire world as well. Following the coup in February 2021, the military has been empowered with excessive force to, they utilize all their force for mass arrest, torture, killings, and devastation of civilian infrastructure. Well, the state of civil resistance is deeply an entrenched issue that has been complicated due to the prolonged conflict that still continues. For decades, the country has been plagued by internal wars between the central government and various ethnic armed organizations, which seeks autonomy or the federal governance. Now, the 2021 coup has further escalated all these conflicts, as many of these have either intensified their campaigns aiming to get themselves aligned with the pro-democracy movement. The rise of the People's Defense Forces of the PDF formed and has served as a direct response to the coup. The lengthy duration of all these conflicts underscores the critical need for communication, reconciliation, and a transition towards a federal democratic framework that addresses the concerns of all the ethnic groups. Now, I want to focus here about the society, because as being a sociology student, we need to focus. We talk about all of which happens on the authoritarian side, but we fail to understand, we fail to look forward to what actually happens to the common individuals of the land. The humanitarian emergency which happens in Myanmar, or the humanitarian crisis, is fueled by the military aggression and ongoing conflict, which presents substantial obstacles to civil resistance and wider populace. It is also driven by military aggression and ceaseless conflict. Well, millions have been displaced due to the military attacks on villages, while many are still struggling with food shortage, insufficient healthcare, and limited availability of basic services. Now, without an end to the chronic political conflict, the humanitarian crisis that Myanmar is going to is likely to deteriorate further, which would definitely threaten both the civil society and the resistance forces within further disintegration. Can you go to the next slide? Well, coming to the specific issues, we have the ethnic divisions, the urban-rural divide, and the resource limitations. Now, I would want to focus on the urban-rural divide because it poses a very great challenge for the civil resistance movement, which happens because large urban agglomerations like Yangon and Manly, they have been political hotbeds with a lot of mass action protests and strikes. Well, these metropolises have greatly enhanced connectivity on the world map. But on the other hand, the rural areas where majority of the population of Myanmar resides, they face major different problems from lack of information to infrastructure and resources. The military also commits more violence against the rural communities. So closing the gap between the urban and rural setting is more important because effective civil resistance heavily depends upon both the combined effort of the urban activists and the rural people's engagement with the process. Again, resource limitation is definitely a significant hurdle that occurs for the civil resistance in Myanmar. So addressing the resource limitations through innovative solutions and international support will definitely be crucial for the sustainability of Myanmar's civil resistance and for its broader fight for justice and equality. Now, the struggle against military rule is not, it is not merely a pursuit of democracy, but it is also the aspiration to envision a united, inclusive, and equitable nation. Because as this evolves, much will depend on the solving of critical problems and the seizing of opportunities that lie ahead for Myanmar. So this way, we will need to involve ethnic reconciliation in order to remain a united, seeking international mediation to prevent further escalation, gathering resources to strengthen resistance movement, and promoting the establishment of an inclusive Myanmar. The next slide, please. Yes, now the future trajectory, again, I would want to focus on overcoming the ethnic divisions to sustain unity, international mediation to stop escalating and creating an inclusive Myanmar. Coming to the conclusion, from general issues that we spoke about of military violence, prolonged conflict, humanitarian crisis, all of these are, I'll be concluding, all of these are quite typical and known issues, stretching to the specific issues of ethnic divisions, urban-rural divide, and to understand the resource limitations. All of these reflect the entirety of Myanmar's enduring, yet complexities of their struggle that they have against military dominance. So the issues ranging from all of these are deeply intertwined, which creates significant obstacles for Myanmar's civil resistance. However, the perseverance of the people or the individuals in face of all these challenges reflect their unwavering commitment to achieving justice and democracy. So I would want to describe the civil resistance that happens right now as strong and improving because the movements have demonstrated determinations among the people, which has been gaining momentum despite the severe repression that they receive from the army. So the quality of adapting to any situation makes us to understand the possibility of a positive upward trajectory, which showcases how effective the civil resistance is going to be. Looking forward, the conflict or the resistance stands at a very pivotal crossroad because whatever happens right now for the years to come can definitely shape the destiny of the nation. And the resistance movement has definitely sustained itself. It has matured over. So definitely the road to democracy or what we hope for is definitely going to be a very rocky path. But the array of resistance stakeholders will definitely determine the trajectory of Myanmar's future. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. We'll move on to our second presentation. Our second presentation is Basu Parno Rakshit. He's from the Center of South Asian Studies, Pondicherry University. He'll be presenting on the three Brotherhood Alliance, common enemy, ideological differences, and diverging strategy. Mr. Parno, your first one.
First slide. Good morning, everybody. I'm Shobhan Lokit from South Asian Studies, Pondicherry University. as Femi introduced, that I will be presenting on Three Brotherhood Alliance, Common Enemy, Ideological Differences, and Diverging Strategies. Before even I delve into the major findings, I would like to start with an anecdote that an 18-year-old from Myanmar has given up on studies, university studies, and wants to take up arms. So it's not forced on him, but it is a decision that has been taken by his parents. But he wants to join the rebel group, which will be actually working against the military coup. So my presentation will be actually talking about how this resistance movement builds up and these rebel groups come to the forefront as the savior, and we'll track the trajectory as I progress. So one of the rebel groups that I will be talking about is on the ethnic armed organization. So the ethnic armed organization. So my first slide speaks about the issue. So this issue is where the three Brotherhood Alliance is formed. So it's an issue that unites the three. And the Three Brotherhood Alliance constitutes of the Arakan Army, the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army, and the Tang National Liberation Army. So they are largely formed as a response to the increasing military aggression of the junta known as the Tatmadaw. The pattern of violence that I've mentioned about three violence in my first slide is direct violence, indirect violence, and cultural violence. So direct violence, the Myanmar civil war is heavily characterized physically and psychological and physical harm is inflicted upon individuals, including killing, torture, rape, and beatings. Widespread incidents of sexual violence where women and girls have been subjected to rape and sexual assault by military personnel and local militants. Even physical attacks such as beheading, forced parades, and mass killings have remained in practice, creating a climate of terror and severe human rights abuse. Whereas indirect violence indicate the systematic policies and social structures that have harmed individuals by denying their basic human rights. One of the best examples where human rights have been denied is the indiscriminate violence on the Rohingyas in the Rakhine state. And the cultural violence is about the dehumanizing and the delegitimization of the Rohingya through state propaganda, where there is a destruction of cultural and religious side, bans on religious practice, and vilification of Muslim traditions. So, in order to counter these violence, the best operation, the notable engagement by the alliance has been the Operation 1027, launched on 27th October 2023. The operation resulted in significant territorial gains for the alliance, including capture over 300 million outposts, 13 towns in northern Shan state, and data shows that as of early 2024, the 3BA, the Three Brotherhood Alliance, had seized control of approximately 200 military outposts and multiple strategic locations, including border trade zones. So I've mentioned about, and they have certain demands of restoration of democracy, restoration of civil rule, and they want constitutional recognition as an alliance so that they can work against the regime, against the regime, and also because they work against the regime, they have been tagged as terrorists. They have been listed as terrorist unwanted groups, for which they also want this miscommunication or the wrong information that the military junta is propagating around that they are terrorists, that needs to be also removed. So I'll go to the next slide. So I've been talking about an issue that has induced the alliance, or that has been a primordial reason for the alliance. And now I'll be talking about two major sub-issues where I'll be talking about the ideological difference. While so the Arakan Army and the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army and the Tang National Liberation Army, they have the common enemy, which is the military junta, but they differ on ideological terms. So the Arakan Army aims to create an independent political entity for Rakhine people. Their ideology is driven by ideology is driven by way of Rakhita. This concept emphasizes national liberation and the restoration of Arakan sovereignty to its people. It promotes the establishment of a Rakhine people's authority to govern the region, which aligns with the vision of self-governance and local decision-making. So I've mentioned about how their ethnic focus, key ideology, and goals differ. So the Arakan army ethnic focus is Rakhine. Their key ideology is ethnic nationalism, but their goal is autonomy for Rakhine state. So this is applicable for Myanmar's National Democratic Alliance Army as well, where the Konkan community advocates greater autonomy with Myanmar, emphasizing the need for self-determination. They aim to establish a political framework that allows for local governance and decision-making. Reflecting their unique cultural and historical context, Konkan leaders also view federalism as a viable solution to address ethnic grievances. Whereas Tang National Liberation, they are active for they are working for promoting cultural identity along political autonomy, and they emphasize on social justice and equitable resource distribution. Where so the next slide. So the next slide speaks about the diverging strategies. So I've spoken about independent actions, negotiation with junta and external influence. Independent action where Beijing negotiated a ceasefire in northern Shan state in January. One member of the coalition, the Arakan, ignored Chinese effort to seize its campaigning in Rakhine state, where the other two listened to Beijing and didn't. They listened to the ceasefire, but they again doubted the Beijing interest or the Beijing order late in July. So we can see that one has not listened to Beijing in January and the other has not listened to it on July. So they are in the same alliance but taking their strategic decisions at different times. And the next is the negotiation with the junta, where the Arakan army is ready to collab or is ready to seek political solutions to political problems but in a particular but there has to be a significant concession from the junta. Only then will they negotiate with the juntas. Whereas in case of the MNDA, they want China as the mediator when they are negotiating with the juntas. So they only then when they will negotiate with the juntas, whereas Tang National Liberation Army has expressed a clear desire. They will only negotiate when there will be a halt to airstrikes in their territories. Only then will they okay, so let's find out. So external influences, when almost all nations condemned the 2021 military takeover, China was amongst the few countries that refused to condemn military regime. China has been a major supporter of juntas, providing aids to it. So has it. It has also provided aids to the ethnic armed organization. So we can see that China, that seems as a strategic presence to ensure peace, is actually the causer of continuous diverging strategies and conflicts. So they are actually leading to peace issues. They are actually triggering civil war in Myanmar. So finally, I'll wind up by saying in my trajectory that, so the next slide. Because of the Three Brotherhood Alliance, it has weakened the juntas, the Tatmadas. The struggle but one thing has been also observed, that there has been a struggle of autonomy between the three alliance, but they don't realize, or in spite of realizing they are aspiring for an autonomy, but that is actually challenging the whole basis of their cooperation as an organization. And another major point is that China is not at all bothered about the peace dialogue in Myanmar. Rather, they are bothered about their trade interests, their economic interests, and for which they are trying to keep on fueling the tensions between the two. And finally, the main objective of all the Myanmar populace is broader peace and democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Suparna. We'll move on to our third presentation. Our third presentation is by Abhiruchi Chaudhary. He's a research assistant at the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bengaluru. He'll be presenting on asylum seekers of Myanmar, challenges beyond borders. Third presentation.
So my initial topic was asylum seekers, but asylum seekers and refugees, they have a very minor difference. So I'll explain the difference. UNHCR defines refugees as those who have fled their countries to escape conflict, violence, or persecution and have sought safety in another country. An asylum seeker is basically migrants who have been forced to leave their homeland. In general, and in terms of law, asylum seeker is someone who has made a claim to be considered for refugee status as per refugee conventions. The difference between asylum seeker and refugee is that asylum seeker's claim of refugee has been accepted. So why is there a refugee problem? There are more than 1.5 million refugees from Myanmar, and they are mostly settled in Bangladesh, followed by Malaysia and India. The data available shows that the refugee population mostly comprises of Rohingya Muslims. So I will focus the focus of my presentation would be on Rohingya Muslims who are originating from Rakhine. Rohingyas are the largest stateless community in the entire world. Rohingyas have mainly taken refuge in Bangladesh, followed by Malaysia. 2023 was one of the worst years for Rohingya refugees who tried to escape the country through sea routes. Around 569 people died or were found missing. Just going through what the conflict is in Rakhine. So the rate of poverty in the state is almost 2 times that what it is in other parts of the country. Two major inhabitants in the region are Rakhine Buddhists and Rakhine Muslims. Other minority groups include Kama Muslims. There has been a tense relations between Rakhine and Rohingyas, and their animosity has been escalated from 2012. Before the escalation of violence after this incident happened, propaganda against the Rohingya Muslims had been going on for months. Rakhine Nationalist Development Party and the extreme right Buddhist monk organizations, these were at the forefront of the conflict. Going through the violence in 2012, the main reason which has been cited for violence is alleged rape and killing of Rakhine women and murdering of 10 Muslim pilgrims. Government has presented the violence escalated as intercommunal clash. However, as per UNHCR report, the depiction is inaccurate. Myanmar security forces were bystanders in the violence. Not only that, they also took part in the violence against Rohingya Muslims. As per the report, Rohingyas were often not permitted by the security forces to save their houses, which were put on fire. This was an important point in the juncture when the relationship between Rakhine and the Rohingyas was tarnished. 2017 conflict on 25 August, Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army launched assaults on 13 security checkpoints. The security forces launched Operation Clearance, which was brutal and inhumane operation, leading more than 700,000 people seeking refuge in Bangladesh. Was the refugee situation in Bangladesh after violence in 2017? As I said, 700,000 Rohingya refugees have taken refuge. The previous Sheikh Hasina government permitted more than 1 million refugees to stay at Cox's Bazar. residing in Bangladesh and the ones who are illegal in Bangladesh. Human trafficking from Bangladesh was on its highest in 2019. Next, I will discuss the refugee situation in Malaysia. So around 171,000 refugees from Myanmar currently reside in Malaysia. The refugee community, unlike in Bangladesh, do not reside in camps. They reside within the native community in shabby, overcrowded, cheap flats located in those cities where they could easily find a labor job in restaurants and factories. Most of the refugees from Myanmar in Malaysia live in the Klang Valley. So one of the major problems which refugee community faces in Malaysia is that they don't have the permission to work. Refugees are not allowed to work or access free of healthcare facility and public education facility. UNHCR, along with the help of NGOs and religious organizations, operate more than 100 learning centers. The teachers are mostly from the refugee community. Earlier, there were plans to issue IMM cards, which would have permitted Rohingya refugees to work, but however, that plan was backtracked. Then there is the problem of discrimination. The locals of Malaysia are often found to take advantage of Rohingya refugee community. A survey revealed that they had to pay higher rents. Cab drivers are reluctant to provide service to them. Since a lot of them don't have UNHCR cards, their movement remains limited. Further, just 20% of the children of refugees go to UNHCR funded and run education projects, which depicts that there is a problem of education as well. The rest of them go to community-based schools. Community-based schools do not have proper infrastructure, often overcrowded, and there is a problem of good teachers there. In conclusion, the refugees from Myanmar, especially Rohingyas, will find it more difficult to seek refuge in other countries. The refugee destination countries, especially countries like Indonesia, which is a Muslim country and it is a lot bigger than Bangladesh, and it has urged UNHCR to settle Rohingyas in other third countries. And as we see the rise of populism, I don't think refugees would be welcomed in those countries. Also, we have seen what happened in the EU, how the refugee problem could not be solved and consensus could not be reached, which has led to a divide among the EU nations. If ASEAN countries attempt to take a central role in solving the refugee and come with something like Dublin regulations, for which many scholars have advocated, I think it would further lead a divide among the Asian nations and lead to further weakening of the organization.
Thank you, Abhijit. Okay, we'll move on to our last presentation. Our last presentation is by Nuha Amina. She's a research assistant at the National Institute of Advanced Studies. She'll be presenting on mushrooming online scams, uncontrolled syndicates, absent state, and its global threat. Over to you, Nuha. You have 6 + 2 minutes.
Good morning, all. I will be speaking about the online scam centers which have surfaced on the media recently. And I will first begin with a few relevant developments. So the first one, can you please move to the next slide?
The next slide.
Sounds. Development is where on 24th January, China and Bangkok coordinated for coordination centers in Mesot, which is a city. It's a town which is at the border, situated in Myanmar. It's bordering towns with of Thailand, which borders Myanmar, and yeah. And then the second update is from 21st January, where officials from China, Myanmar, and Thailand agreed to back down on telecommunication fraud centers in Myanmar. And on the same day, an editorial in Global New Light of Myanmar revealed that the junta had repatriated more than 55,000 foreign nationals involved in scam centers since September 2020. on 17 January, Chinese and Thai authorities detained 12 members of a crime ring for allegedly kidnapping 6 victims from Thailand and trafficking them to Myanmar. On 5th January, the Prime Minister of Thailand, Thongpan Shinawatra, called upon the ASEAN states to tackle the online scams issue. Her statement comes as she claims to receive a phone call. She stated that it may have been AI generated, and it was from a world leader. Where they asked her to make a quote unquote donation. And my last update is where a Chinese actor, Wang Xing, was released by the Thai police after he was abducted in Myanmar. And in the process, it encouraged about Chinese families of 1,800 Chinese nationals to share similar trafficking incidents of their relatives. Now, the reason why these trafficking incidents did not go reported within China is because their law does not have a provision where you can report a missing man. You can only report missing women and children. Now, the next slide is what's happening in the background. The first one is okay, the spread of scam centers. Now, initially, these scam centers, they started flourishing during COVID-19 because there were lots of travel restrictions to China. So these Chinese syndicates, they decided to establish their scam centers in the northwestern part of Myanmar, which is in the Kokang region. And however, in 2024, Chinese authorities, they pulled off a crackdown, and many of these syndicates were captured, and as well as Chinese and other nationals, other foreign nationals who were able to be released. However, despite this, they went further down south and they started regrouping again. Now, the reason why this they started regrouping and this sort of multiplied. They have the scam centers have multiplied, and the reason being that since Thailand, one of the reasons is that Thailand has lax visa policies for more than 90 countries, so it's easier for people to cross over from Thailand, the Moi River, and enter Myanmar. So lots of people who travel to Thailand, they are given job opportunities, handsomely. So they are all abducted and taken to Myanmar. And how are these scams carried out? It's through this process called pig butchering. Essentially, is where pig farmers, they feed the pigs and they fatten it, and then after that they slaughter it. So to draw an analogy from that, essentially people are made to invest into a cryptocurrency. They are initially given a return, and then later it's stopped, and they sort of dupe that amount. So that's one. Now the second point is second core is law and order situation. So essentially, you see the Chinese warlords, they benefit from the support they receive from the border guard forces, as well as other allied ethnic armed groups. Right? So, in fact, a prominent figure in Myanmar who's Colonel Saw Chit Thu, and his militia earn about 192 million USD annually from these camp centers. And you also have some ethnic groups who are directly involved in the operation of these groups, of these camp centers. Now, lastly is it's a global threat. It's a global threat because we have people being drawn in from Southeast Asia, East Asia, and other nationalities like from Brazil and Ethiopia to come and work in these centers. They held against their will, and they mostly they target English-speaking countries. They target Western countries. where investors are mostly from Western countries. So that's that. And in this regard, the US and the European Union have imposed sanctions on Colonel Scholarship and his group. Besides, a recent report by the Justice for Myanmar also called on international governments to impose sanctions on the border guard forces, its leaders, its businesses, and stakeholders of these businesses. Now, so what does this mean? We sort of see a shift that initially they were targeting, you know, normal, not non-prominent figures, but now we have moved on to celebrities and world leaders and politicians. The second thing is that I don't think it's likely to stop. Because they have infra support. And lastly is that as we saw in 2024, Chinese authorities were able to sort of tamper this whole scam activity, but then so it sort of shows that it has some amount of influence in the region. But it has influence in the domestic affairs of Myanmar. However, if the current situation is likely to escalate, if there's going to be a greatest focus on the English-speaking countries and Western countries, and other countries, you know, we have victims coming in Myanmar, countries, and there is a less likelihood that China would intervene.
With that, we come to an end of our first session for the second day. We'll move on to our discussion round. Is there Anand here? Anand Sagar, no? Okay. Okay. Then we move on to our unofficial discussion round then. We'll start with Henna. You have 2 minutes. What? 2 minutes?
Good morning, everyone. First of all, congratulating all the presenters. So I'll start by one. So Leah's presentation, you covered most of the things, but I just have a small question for you. Like Malaysia was promoting the idea of ceasefire. So what do you think this is affecting the ethnic groups? Because we know there are EAO, like all the ethnic groups. How do you think this Malaysia's decision is coming? Actually, it's a common question. And then to Saupanno, your presentation was very good because you explained most of the things. And I'd like to ask you, if there is no unity between the three brothers, then how do you think it will win? Because even if you take India's political history, we have seen alliances of parties, but we have always seen them coming down. Like not always, but then some of them coming down. So how do you think that unity works between them? Because in the ideological differences, you talked about one party want the support of China, and China is also supporting the junta government. So how do you think that works? And to Abhiruchi, you talked about the refugees and about how their situation is in different countries like Bangladesh and Malaysia. So, like, I wanted to know about if they're having such a bad situation there, because when I did my paper, I learned about the IIM president the head who went to Bangladesh and talked with the Rohingya people. So they were also asking their way back to Rakhine State. So I'd like to get, like, it's just my personal opinion. I'd like to know more about the Bangladeshi refugees a bit. Noah, your presentation was too good, but the first slide was a bit too much. Like it was a lot of points, broad paragraphs. So I think you should just make 2-3 slide points. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Henna. We'll move on to Kalpana.
Congratulations, everyone. I'll start with Leah's presentation first of all. Is there a difference in the reason for the violence that is occurring in the urban and the rural areas? If you could clearly mention that. And you mentioned international mediation. Given since yesterday we've been talking about the failure of international mediation, how do you still propose that to be an effective strategy to counter the violence happening over there? And what sort of international mediation were you focusing on? Is it the UN peacekeeping force? We're talking about ASEAN what exactly it is, because again, certain neighboring countries have been worsening the situation and taking benefit out of what's happening in Myanmar. And you mentioned resource mobilization towards your territories. What resources exactly are we talking about, and for which parties? Regarding the Three Brotherhood Alliance and Suborno's presentation, has the Three Brotherhood Alliance not committed any sort of crime? Because what I see is that you are dividing both the, if I were to put the three actors on one side and the military on the other, you're dividing them into black and white. So is there a gray area for the Three Brotherhood Alliance as well? And they are envisioning for three different types of government functions in America, right? So do you see a sort of coalition happening or them actually breaking away from the alliance in the future? That is my question for you. And regarding Abhiruchi, do we see a rise of non-state actors in terms of terror in the refugees which are there in the different countries? Because that is something that we faced in West Asia due to the conflicts that were happening over there. Do we see a similar sort of trend happening in Myanmar as well? And regarding Nuha, what type of scams exactly are we talking about? Have you talked about the cryptocurrency, the economic scam, right? Are there also different types of extortion related online scams happening there? And what is the demographic? What is the demography of the people in the region? What, if there are any specific age group and gender which are being targeted through these online scams across Myanmar? And to what extent do you think that the state actors and the insurgent groups, if they have mobilized these online scams to generate revenue as well? So that is it. If the state actor currently present or the insurgent groups, have they also mobilized online scams in a manner to generate revenue and fund what they're doing?
And adding to, sorry, adding to this Kalpana, and you are talking about China's interference and US also sanction, then don't you think it will impact on the, Myanmar relations with the country or China itself and US itself? Don't you think it will impact? If you are thinking that, if you are saying yes, then how will it impact on Myanmar's relation? I think in future, in coming days, Myanmar will be losing its relations, I understand that. And Abhiruchi, we are talking about this Rohingya issues and it's a common issues for our neighboring countries. Then what would you suggest for Myanmar? And it is a serious matter. Do you think Myanmar is supporting or Myanmar is having any solutions for that? In future, what will be the state of conflict or is there any, differences or is there any, impact on the bilateral or multilateral relations of Myanmar with South Asian countries especially?
Okay, we'll get on to the answers since you have got a couple of questions, and then we will move on to the second set of discussions. So, Leah?
Well, thank you for the questions. And for the discussion as well. Well, I am not, I can't answer all the questions because this is just my first phase of research. So, coming to Kalpana's question as to the international mediation, how would you suggest? Well, the reason why I put international mediation is if there is ethnic conflict going on within the country, we need someone from outside to work. What I personally would want was a global mediation, where both of them can sit and talk, because I believe in diplomacy. This is just a personal opinion, and I can't come on a complete statement as a bit. So, and on about resource limitations, I want to focus about the humanitarian crisis that they face, because majority of them, because of the humanitarian, because the aid is not there. There are a lot of people who are still in need of basic necessities. So the basic necessities, which would primarily include from food to medical supplies. So that is what I focused on, the resource limitations.
Thank you for the questions. I'll first address a common question both asked by Kalpana and Hina, that the Three Brotherhood Alliance is moving apart. How will they work as a coalition? So I've tried to present it through my slides that in the beginning I've spoken about how they are coming together as an alliance and countering the junta. And I've mentioned about two issues in between, the ideological difference and the diverging strategies. But again, when I'm talking about my trajectory, my first point is how they are remaining a counter to the junta. So in spite of having different strategies and diverging goals, as my title mentions about the word common enemy. So in that case, these three are acting in solidarity, and they are working not as individuals or autonomous bodies, but as the representatives of Myanmar populace who are they are trying to work as they are the representatives who are not bothered about their own self-interest when it comes to the common enemy, the military junta. And the second question, and another question that you asked, Kalpana, was that recently, in the beginning, it was a three brotherhood alliance where they were all working together, and you said that I've distinguished it into black and white. So, is there any part of gray? I mean, is there any gray field? So Arakan Army, one of the three brotherhood alliance, Arakan Army is becoming predominantly hegemonic. They are in the beginning they were working for the local governance, the decision making, and for the what should I say, for the Arakan ideology. If you say they are working individually, but now they are having a separate hegemonic pressure, especially on the Myanmar population, especially in the Rakhine region, and they are inflicting more discriminatory draconian rules on the Rohingya refugees. So I hope I could.
Thank you, Abhiruchi.
So, what I was discussing, Bangladesh refugees, do they want to return? So the studies which have been conducted was like survey studies. So one survey will be saying anything, the other survey will be saying other things. So I've seen that most of the surveys that they have done is like they don't want to return. However, your point is correct. There is, I read about like foreign aid agencies do get money from foreign governments through central bank. And they want that refugees should not leave. So they are urging refugees not to leave from there. Second, discussing terror attacks in refugee camps. I have not come across any terror attacks on these refugee camps, at least in Bangladesh and Malaysia. However, local people, I mean, the refugee community has faced attack from the local community. About your question on what would be the solution, I don't want to be pessimistic, but there seems to be no solution to this refugee problem. Refugees would be treated more badly. They would have to face more inhuman conditions because nobody wants to take them, and they don't want to bear the financial costs. They see them as a threat to the security, so nobody wants to take them. However, if the neighborhood of Myanmar, they arrive on a consensus and they apply various sanctions, which I think is very difficult. Because no neighborhood of Myanmar, they won't coming on a consensus on this issue, then the problem will be seen.
Yes, thank you for your suggestion and questions. Compromise to answer your question regarding what other type of crime sensitive activities actually belong to from what I read, I found that not only do they carry out human trafficking activities, they also sex trafficking. There's also drugs,
Louder,
drugs.
Louder.
Okay.
The people online.
Okay, can I repeat?
No, that's it.
All right. So other activities as such take place, and another question you posed was whether how the state actors and allied ethnic groups stand to benefit from these online scams? They support the Chinese warlords, Chinese syndicates, overseas criminal groups who have sort of established themselves in Myanmar, and because of this, they have received criticism from Beijing. Because as in 2024, what happened is a lot of Chinese nationals were being abducted into Myanmar to scam their own compatriots, other Chinese people. So that's what happened. However, in recent newspapers, after the whole tampering down and they tried to bring the whole activity down, they moved down south, so going back to what I was saying is that in a recent article I read that the state actors deny any involvement.
Thank you, Nuha. I would like to invite, discussants online, if they have any questions. We have Aprupa. Do we have any more questions other than Aprupa?
If I may, I'm a little confused. Is it a discussion round or is it a question round? Like, can I go ahead with my question? Or
Yeah.
should I?
No, it's a question for our online participants, so you can ask your questions. I just want to see if we have more questions from our online audience. Please raise your hand if you do. Okay, Aprupa, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Femi. And thank you for the panel for the wonderful presentation. I have my first question to Benny. I think I'm spelling your name right. I'm a little confused with one aspect of your presentation on the resistant group, that all the factors or the other points that you mentioned, it seemed that the resistant group had a linear growth, like it's a continuing in the same pace. Do you think that's what your observation is? That's what my question is to you. My second question is to Shoporno. Shoporno, the first thing is that you have emphasized on the Brotherhood Alliance since the post-coup situation, right? But the alliance has been pre-existing, and it was not the only Tatmadaw who have termed them as terrorists. It has been a part of Suki regime also. So the alliance did exist, right? Even the ethnic armed groups did exist. Arkan army is a comparatively newer compared to the rest of the two. That is one confusion I had. The second question that I have is regarding your finding. I would, with due respect, little disagree with you with your primary, primary motivation or the ideology. You said key ideologies or key factors of their, motivation. I think the points that you made mention is, of course, the primary objective of theirs. But as you yourself have mentioned, that the Kokand resistance movement is, Kokand ethnic movement is influenced by the ethnic grievances also, but that includes the nationalism aspect from there also. It's not as pronounced as the Arakan group, but even that is there. And same, the grievances against is also economic in all three of them, because the three of the armed forces that they belong to, the region they belong to is the most underdeveloped, economically underdeveloped region of Myanmar. So that is again a very tying factor for both these three groups. So that is something I wanted to point out to you. You did mention about China's role, and but you didn't emphasize on the Chinese investment, which I was looking forward, especially when it comes to the Rakhine region, the Sitwe port development, the pipeline development. These is one of the very important and pivotal point and do play a big role when it comes to the movement. So these are the 2 points. Thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you, Femi, for the opportunity to ask the questions.
Thank you, Aprupa. Do we have any more questions from online audience? Okay, we'll take our discussions now, sir. Vaishak and Ashutosh, you can ask your questions.
Yes, I have 2 questions specifically towards Abhijit and Nuha. Abhijit, my first question is that since the US government has come in power last year, has there been any change in the Bangladeshi government's approach towards the refugees? I have read that the Bangladesh government still wants them to be repatriated into a third country. Is he doing that more quickly? Is it slowing down? What is the situation there? And Nuha, I was reading last month that the Junta government had enforced a new cybersecurity law that aimed to curb cyber attacks and these cyber scams. But the effect of that in the end was that they were also curbing the citizens of Myanmar from accessing VPNs, from accessing social media and things like that. So do you think that in the name of addressing these scam centers, the Junta has maybe cracked down more on the freedoms in the country?
So my first question is to Abhiruchi. As said yesterday also by many presenters, that Myanmar, the country itself doesn't recognize Rohingya as a part of its own country. So how does the status of the Rohingyans is being affected, or what would be the status in the future of the Rohingyas? My second question will be to Nuha. I just wanted to know how the uncontrolled syndicates operate along the Thailand borders, and how does it affect the status of conflict in Myanmar? And to Soporno, you mentioned about the way of Rakhita while talking about the Arakan. So if you could throw some more light on that, it would be helpful for me. And to Leah, you talked about the resource limitation for the state of resistance. Could you please explain on it how the resource limitation is going to affect the state of conflict in the country?
Thank you, Ashutosh. We'll get back to our presenters. Leah, over to you.
Thank you for all your questions. I will be definitely including that in my inputs as well. Regarding what Aprupa asked about the resistance, is it continuing on the same pace? Well, I did mention that it can be described as strong and improving. To support, based on a report on August 14, 2024, it's been mentioned that the resistance is definitely making major advances. Definitely the capture of the northern city of Lashio was a severe blow to the junta itself. So compared to how it has been going forward, it has been improving. So that is what I would want to make a mark on that. And to Ashutosh's question about the resource limitations, just like what I said to Kalpana, I mentioned our resource limitation as to how about the humanitarian crisis, the lack of basic necessities. So as in a state of conflict now, I would want to focus more on the society. If there is a lack, if the military or in a state of conflict, if basic necessities are not provided, there's definitely a severe blow to the society. So what I mentioned of resource limitation is the lack of food. It might be the basic necessities that we all have. So that is what I mentioned to the resource limitation.
Barno.
So thank you for the insights. First I'll take up, thank you Purupa for the comments. So I'll definitely work on the first two points that you said. But I'd like to take up the last question that you made that I have not mentioned about Chinese investment. So due to paucity of time, I didn't go into details about Chinese investments, but when I was talking about ideological differences and diverging strategies, I did mention that China is not interested into ceasefire or the relaxation of tension in Myanmar. Rather, it's more concerned about the economic interests and the Belt and Road Initiative, and also the trade that is with the trade that happens between China and Myanmar that gets that has been affected time and again due to the fight due to the tensions between the military junta and the alliances. And the second one is I'll definitely I didn't throw light, or I had not been able to clear out that or have been not clear enough that the Three Brotherhood Alliance or the alliance did existed before even the coup was there in 2021. And then I'll take Ashutosh's question that the way Arakan ideology, which emphasizes national liberalization, national liberation and sovereignty. That's it.
Ruchi?
So Vaishak, your question, how would the new Trump administration work with the approach towards Bangladesh? So the third country resettlement program, I think it was stopped by the Democratic government in 2013. So I'm not sure if it's ongoing. I think in 2023 they restarted it again. So I'm not sure how the Trump administration would.
Yunus government, the new Bangladesh government.
Oh,
Yes, Yunus government. That is why it will, yeah.
Sorry, I'll come back to you later. And what would be the status of Rohingya in future? I think they will be more persecuted because the neighboring countries, nobody is ready to accept any kind of refugees, let alone be Rohingyas. So yeah, it's a pessimistic view, but I think that would be that would happen in future.
Thank you, Ruchi. I'll hand over the floor to Sir for his intervention.
You, I mean, there are two sets of points that I would like to make, one on presentation and one is a kind of a tip that all of us want to keep while making a presentation. When you make a presentation in a conclave like this, keep the following thing in mind. One is the content. The content you have read, you have worked. It is extremely important. I think yesterday's session, the last session, and today's session, you all have done your homework in terms of the content. So when you go back today, just use this as a tick boxes and then see where all you have done well. Do a self-analysis, yeah, in terms of content. The second one is equally important is communication. How you communicate the content to the rest of us. One is your homework. You are extremely good with your homework. You have done your homework. But have you communicated that homework to us, to the audience? So how do you communicate? You communicate through two ways. One is the PowerPoint. The second one is the language. So was your PowerPoint helped you to communicate better? The second one was your language. You know, we all have to learn this, no? Was your language good enough to reach out to the others? So the first one is technical. PowerPoint is technical, how you manage it. Language comes out of confidence. Yeah, the more confident you are, the better communicator you will be. So that comes with experience. So if you think you have lacked it, don't worry, it will come to us. All of us went through that. Yeah. But the PowerPoint is something you have to give emphasis as much as you give emphasis to your homework and the content. No PowerPoint can be more than 6-7 slides because you will not be able to present it. And then don't crowd your PowerPoint. The first slide is the best example of what I'm trying to tell you. No, we have to learn that. You know, the second slide was really good. I don't know why you did the first slide and the second slide was good. So PowerPoint should be easy to, it's a spoon feeding the audience. Yeah, so if it is crowded, I'm not going to look at that at all. So that is the second part of the presentation in skills, you know. So homework, content, and communication. Now I'll come to the content. Before I go into the individual stories, when you make this presentation, please keep this in mind. You know, I'm sure you all have seen, played football, volleyball, or cricket. You know, there is a ground. There is a ground, you know, and there is a player. When you make presentation, keep this in mind. what is the ground that you are looking at? The ground is the larger context or the theme. Pitch is your story within that larger ground, what you are presenting. If Myanmar state of resistance, what is the ground? What is the pitch? If Abhiruchi is talking about refugees, what is the ground? What is the pitch? Which is a narrow one. Yeah. And then the third one is you, where you place yourself. This is what I call as the pivot. Where do you stand, position yourself as a bowler, as a batsman, as a wicketkeeper? You all position yourself, no? So this is where you make a point. In the sense, ground and pitch is what is in front of you, it's given. Pitch is you. So you have to make a point. If you're talking about refugees, if refugee on the ground, Rohingya refugee should be the pitch. No, you took the ground and made that as a pitch for us. I hope you understand what I'm telling you. The first title, a larger title, and the second title are a narrow title. And then where do you stand? You have to tell the story. That is the most important one. The story has to be told in the title itself. Yeah. So that is where you tell them, I am a batsman, I am a bowler, I am a wicket keeper. This is my story. So if I have, so my first question to all four of you would be, what is the story here? The first, the ground, the pitch, and what is your position? Just think about this and let me know. Because then the rest of them is only fill in the blanks. If you get the ground, pitch, and the story right, then the rest of them is only fill in the blanks. You are going to justify what you are telling. Yeah. Now on the individual points. Yeah. Leah, you know, the point that you started with, you also referred to your sociological background. So I was hoping you would tell us something about resistance, the idea of resistance, why people resist. No? Your first slide was not on resistance. First slide was on what is happening in Myanmar. I was expecting, after reading your title, your first slide will talk about what is the state of resistance. Now, since you refer to the sociology, you may want to tell us, why do people resist? And how are Burmese or people in Myanmar resisting? No, that point is missing, no? So maybe I want you to tell us, why do people resist, and how are people in Myanmar resisting? Yeah. The last slide, the trajectory slide, is, I was expecting that you will tell us, where is this resistance going? For example, Abhiruchi in his point said, unfortunately, it is not going anywhere. So I would expect you to tell me, where is the resistance going? No? So I want you to tell me that. No? The second point on second presentation, the Three Brotherhood Alliance. The first slide, you know, it talks about the three brotherhood. You know, your slides are good, Saparna, very precise. Yeah. What unites the three? What happened so far? You know, so that part I have covered. The second title, it talked about ideological differences, but the story was about ethnic differences, geographic differences, political endgame. So either you change the title or you change the content. I think you started with ideological differences, but the way you presented, you looked at they are from different places, they have ethnic objective, no? So either you change the title and tell us what the differences are, and then I think that's a better one. It didn't focus on ideology at all. No, that's like, it focused on the differences between the three groups. Yeah. The diverging strategies, that slide, I think you didn't do a good job. What were the different strategies? I didn't get the diverging, that's the title of your slide. Yeah. Or if you just left it as strategies, then I would have said, okay, group A is doing this, group B is doing this. The moment you say diverging strategies, it implies three groups are doing three different strategies. Or the alliance and the military are divergent. No? I want you to tell us on what the diverging. Yeah. And the last one, the trajectory, you focused on, the focus should be on what will happen. That's what the trajectory is, no? Not what is happening. Okay. On the refugees, the third presentation, Abhiruchi, the first point I said that, you know, we cannot start with refugees and focus only on Rohingya. You are giving a wrong impression. The moment you said refugee problem, I was looking at, okay, you are going to look at refugee problem historically. There are multiple refugee movements at multiple intervals of time from Myanmar. If you are going to focus only on Rohingya, put it up front, the Rohingya refugee problem should be fine, no? So this is an advice to all of you. When you finish the presentation, you have every right to rework your title. Similarly, you can rework your subtitle as well. Yeah. So I didn't get that. You know, the focus was more on the Rohingyas. Yeah. So that's the point that I just wanted to look at. Yeah. The second question that I have is what I was telling in my initial remark. I didn't get a story. What is the story that you are telling about Rohingya refugees? It is more of a description. A, B, C is happening. There is no common thread. Okay. Or in your response to Dr. Bharti, you said this is going to be an unresolved. This is not going to be resolved. You could start with that. And then why the rest of the story could be on why you think Rohingya refugee will remain unsolved. No, that would be a good pitch. That would be a good pivot for you. On the last intervention on Nuha's point, it looked more like a World This Week story than a conclave presentation, Nuha. And the first slide was a killer slide. So you have been working with this. You can't do that. No, it was a crowded slide. I was hoping that your background slide will give us about the background, then you focus more on what is happening, how the scams are being done. There is no background to the scams in your background slide. Yeah. So you tell us what is the background to the scams, meaning one of the weak governance could be the background, or increasing the increasing hold of the scamsters. What is the larger jargon that we use for them? Larger phrase we use them. The organized crime syndicates, you know, the role of the syndicates and how they are looking at online scam as one of the latest one. So the background, I was expecting you will provide a background to the scam. Where is the scam coming from? On the ground, you're looking at what is happening in the pitch. I want what is the ground here. Yeah. And here, what does it mean section? They have, I thought you were too casual. They have moved to world leaders, celebrities. I thought that was too casual a statement, Noha Amina. I don't think you can statistically prove that they have moved to world leaders and celebrities. Yeah, unless you consider that one Chinese actor as a celebrity. Yeah, I stop here. It's a long one. Sorry.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll just, these two topics, they took, topics and themes were very interesting. That is the reason somewhere you couldn't give the justice. Scam you are telling, asserted, it's a serious matter. And countries should take, nations should take it serious, and somehow it has to come with some solutions. Right? It's not an easy matter. It will impact on, it's a global threat, and it will impact on immediate neighboring countries. That's one thing you have to keep in your mind. And give an example for you also. Rohingya, it's an interesting topic. Rohingya, it's not a problem of only, Burma and Bangladesh or India. It is a problem of 3 countries. We all 3 are facing this. For example, in Bangladesh, you see, a few years back, it came out with the solutions. It made some provisions, provided some facilities, and that way you have to give the solution. Otherwise, it will impact on relations with the neighboring countries. And with that also, there is an example of Indian government also. India, there was an I think threat to the bilateral relations with India and Nepal. What India done immediately, it took it serious. It completed 3, I think. three pending projects with Nepal. That's how countries should come out with the solutions. You have to make a presentation, you have to, cover all these issues, keeping in the, in the mind of relations. Okay?
Thank you, ma'am. We'll get back to our presenters. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for the points that you said. I will definitely do that. Regarding why resistance, definitely when it is a place where it is completely of military violence, there is an instinct within the people that they need to be in a much more safer place, and that brings within them a spirit of resistance to resist the military. So I think that is where the fact of resistance comes within the people. As to and the case of Myanmar, yes, for decades or maybe years of violence which is going on within, the need for having a safer place will definitely dwell in each of the people, maybe starting from the kids as well to the elders. And where it is going, well, personal note, I would definitely want them to come together to bridge the ethnic divisions, to bring in inclusive policies. But looking on, even though if the resistance movements are, it is improving and it is getting strong, to come to a positive note would be difficult, but I hope so.
No, on this, Femi, just half a minute. If you take a look at the record of resistance movements in this region, just make a circle, keep Myanmar in the middle. Hong Kong, Thailand, Northeast. The story will tell you, the facts will tell you a different story. No? And the story is resistance have not succeeded in this part of the world.
Thank you, sir, for the intervention. So as you mentioned that I need to rework on the title ideological strategies because it has been concentrating more on locational differences and their different interests. I've only mentioned about Arakan Army's ideology. Whereas in case of diverging strategies, I've tried to take up independent actions, their engagement with junta, and another topic which was external influence. So I tried to speak about how, when I'm talking about the negotiation with the junta, I mentioned that the Arakan Army or the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army or the then National Liberation Army, they all have different strategies when they are interacting with the junta. So they all have different strategic demands from the junta government, whereas the Arakan government, Arakan Army wanted significant concessions from the junta, especially in the Rakhine state. Whereas in case of Myanmar National Democratic Alliance, they wanted China as the mediator. So they differed in their strategic negotiations were different. That's how I wanted to figure it out. And in case of the Tan National Liberation Army, they have demanded they wanted halt to airstrikes. Only then will they negotiate with the junta government. And in case of external influences, I try to look at from the Chinese perspective that how it is working with the three different alliances. So in case of so I've tried to mention about that in case of external influences, the Chinese government sided with the junta as well as the three brotherhood alliances. So there I've tried to mention that how strategically it is being there with both, but it has its own economic interest. And in case of trajectories, I will look into future. I only spoke about what are happening, but in case of trajectory, because the three brotherhood alliance is working proactively, there has been the weakening of the junta government, and there is forced conscription. Students are being picked up from roads and they are being forced to get into army because desperately the number is shrinking. Students are trying to join resistance group instead of the junta government. So I did not shade that much of futuristic.
Thank you, Suparna. Abhiruchi?
Yes, I agree with you. I should have mentioned the title as Rohingya refugees. When I looked into the data, actually, I thought I would do justice if I don't talk about, if I don't give more comparisons more of Americans, because the other refugee, because most of the other communities, they are internally displaced. The refugee community is very, I think it's very small for the other communities, and they are very well settled. Only the Rohingyas are not being settled in third countries like US, Australia, and all. So yeah, I will definitely revert my title, and I will start with that proposition that the situation is going nowhere, so that I can mention how they are being treated in other countries, other than Malaysia and Bangladesh, and I can go to other countries as well.
Thank you, Abhiruchi. Noha?
So from what I read,
Louder.
okay, I was also wondering whether these warlords were existing before COVID. I did not gather enough information regarding that because all I learned from the 2024 operation was that not only did the Chinese authorities want to bring down the innocent activities, they also wanted to put a stop to the movement of refugees, immigrants, non-Chinese activities towards China. So I look into it.
Thank you, Noha. We have finished our first session on time. We have 3 minutes to tea. Can we have a round of applause for our presenters? I would also like to thank our audience online. Thank you for joining us. We'll be breaking for tea and we meet at 11:30, 11:25 here. Yeah, we can break for tea now.
Okay, good morning again. Welcome back to the second. Welcome back to the second session of the day. This session is a panel discussion. We have 4 panelists, all of them joining online. I'm hoping Aprupa Bhattacharjee is already there online. I'm hoping the other 3 will join shortly. Aprupa is a senior PhD scholar at the Institute. PhD is on nation building in 3 countries, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Thailand. A substantial part of her PhD thesis was on the nation building process in Myanmar. So we have her, and then we have 3 more young faculty. One is Dr. Sripati Narayan. I'll introduce him when he joins us. This session looks at two big developments that is happening in Myanmar currently. One is the internal fault lines, and the second one are the external challenges facing Myanmar. So first we'll request Aprupa to speak to us on the internal fault lines, and then the other panelists, I'm hoping they will join. Aprupa, we have 10 plus 2 minutes for everyone, so 12 minutes. Anna Maria will leave a message on the 10th minute to you. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you for all the institute for giving this opportunity. I hope I'm audible to all of you. Yeah. So, as sir has mentioned that today's topic of discussion would be the internal fault lines and external challenges. I thought of emphasizing more on the internal fault line aspect of it and try to understand the reason behind it and look into what are the forms of internal fault lines. Yesterday, we have discussed and emphasized a lot on nationalism as a concept and see how nationalism also plays a role in aggravating or deepening this internal fault line through contextualizing the history. History does play a very important role when it comes to the larger understanding of the concept of nation, and it's intrinsically related to nationalism. We have seen how over the world history, how history has been reconstructed, tweaked to the cater to the larger ideology of nationalism and at certain times to construct nationalism. In fact, Eric J. Hobsbawm, who is a pioneer when it comes to the nationalism studies, compares the role of history to nationalism with that of poppy to heroin addict. I may say it's a fast stretch, but true in a lot of extent. When it comes to fault line and historical understanding of it, it's a general tendency to look into it from the colonial perspective, and a lot of there has been a blaming on the colonial policies itself, but the fault line and the division in Myanmar did exist pre-colonial period itself. So, even before the British colonizers, the first colonization happened in 1826, the kingdoms in Myanmar were divided into ethnic lines. The biggest kingdom, one of the strongest kingdom, the last kingdom of Ava, was a kingdom that is based completely on the Bama or the Barma majority ethnic line itself. And that kingdom was established over a period through the annexation of a previous kingdom that was a kingdom of Pegu, which was again a mon-ethnicity based kingdom. Why I emphasize on this is to understand that a history which is differ from one ethnic group to another. So the same king, for example, King Bodupaya of the kingdom of Ava, who is seen as a hero for the Bama majority, is not a hero when it comes to a Mon ethnicity or the Mon ethnic history. And the Bama kingdom was extended through annexation of other ethnic kingdoms, especially like, for example, the Arakan kingdom. So even when in today's presentation, there was a mention of the way towards Rakhita. Rakhita is specifically is a way of returning back to the Arakanese history, which is something not celebrated against the Bama history. The histories differ, and because the histories differ for each of these ethnic groups, their understanding of nation and their sentiment of nationalism also differs one ethnic group to another. Unfortunately, this becomes a problem when it comes to the ethnic conflict or the ethnic fault lines, because the larger governmental policy of nationalism is based on the majority ethnicity and not caters to the other ethnic understanding of history. Colonial period, I did say, is not not to be blamed for starting the ethnic conflict, but the colonial policy did have a larger impact when it comes to aggravating it or deepening it. The first problem which happened is what Professor Shankari Sundaraman did mention during her presentation, is the different period of annexations in Myanmar. So Myanmar annexation by the British colonial happened in 3 phases, and that had an impact because because most of this region was part of Bengal province. And one of the reason I emphasize on it is to understand the Rohingya conflict and the Arakanese problem. Arakan, which is currently the ethnic group is called as Rakhine. One has to understand the history which happened in 1826, because it was part of the Bengal provinces that also established the similarity of linguistic or the cultural similarity one can find among the Rohingyas with the Bengali communities. So this again plays a very important role of the periods of annexation that happened. The second part is the British colonial administration had been had a quite a big divide. So as Dr. Singh, I hope everybody, Dr. Singh had emphasized that how the ethnic group in Myanmar are divided between core and periphery, where the core is largely where the majority Bama community resides, and in the periphery, the other ethnic group resides, is very important when it comes to British administration also. British had a direct administration, and the policy had a direct implications on the core area or the Bama area. Whereas in the periphery, British had a proxy form of administration, which was led by these communities, kings who was known as Savas or the lordships. So a lot of the policy which was anti for the Bama community or the central Mon Bama community were pro for these communities in the periphery. So when the anti-colonial movement started, a lot of the periphery ethnic-based communities took a pro-British stand, and that did have an impact. Now that I mentioned about the anti-colonial movement, one has to also understand the nationalist movement and the anti-colonial movement in Myanmar are the same thing. They started together. So both is a fallout of each. The anti-colonial movement is a fallout of the nationalist movement, and the nationalist movement is a fallout of the anti-colonial movement in Myanmar. So the movement per se was started by 2 key factors. One being the Hmong, which I think Vaishak was already emphasizing yesterday while talking that starting from 1906 about the Hmong movement, and why did the Hmong were the one who played a role in an anti-colonial or the nationalist movement. The reason being, with the new colonial power, they were not getting patronage. A monkhood in any of these Buddhist countries are completely dependent on the patronage from the either be from the kingdom or from the government. Okay, that lack of patronage and also the power. So in Myanmar, the monks have always been politically active, be it in the previous kingdom, and that has been the trend in even present time also. So the lack of power when it comes to the British colonial time was a big instigating factor for the monks to lead this movement. The other key flair of the anti-colonial and the nationalist movement was the educated youth who came from who had the Western education, got enlightened, and wanted the same replication in their own country, who were known as Thakins. And they started initially a movement called Deobama Asione, although the movement did include some of the ethnic members also. But because Deobama Asione as a word was essentially meant that we, the Burmans, when the movement percolated from the elite to the larger mass, it all became about the Bama identity. That's how it became. It, instead of being just anti-colonial in its sentiment, it became anti any outsider. And the repercussion was the first riot that happened in Myanmar in 1932, which was against the Chinese and the Indian workers working there. So larger understanding of nationalism that percolated from the entire movement that happened, so that it was about safeguarding one's own ethnicity, that specifically Bama ethnicity, against any outsider. Any outsider has been changing, be it British, then it became Indian, then it became Chinese, and over the period it also became the Rohingyas. So any form of outsider, one needs to protect the identity, and because of the involvement of the monk, it included religion. So Bama became equivalent to being Buddhist, and all needs to be protected. And the same in ideology influence was nationalism, or conceptual influence was in among the Tatmadaw. Things became worse with the Tatmadaw was because Tatmadaw again was completely trained and had the foundation from the other colonial power in Myanmar, that is the Japanese. They were trained to be extremely protective. Their motive is all about safeguarding the borderland, and ruthlessness was what they have inherited from their trainers, the Japanese army. Post-independence, the first biggest setback for the fault line, or something that permanently deepened the fault line, was the failure of the first Panglong Agreement. The Panglong Agreement was a beacon of hope for all the ethnic groups, and there was an idea that there will be a federal structure, which didn't happen, especially with the murder of Aung San. And that led to a permanency of mistrust among the ethnic group and towards a larger government that is led by a majority ethnic group, that is the Bama, and started worsening because of the policies which was introduced by the further governmental policies that happened after post-independence. Like somebody yesterday mentioned about the overemphasis of UNU, the first prime minister, on the religion and the inclusion of Buddhism as a religion as a focus when it comes to the government policy. Second, Niven didn't emphasize on the religion per se, but he made the emphasis shift to the Burmese language and Burmese language, and enforce it through the tool of education. Currently also, this problem that we have to understand whenever we are looking into ethnic conflict, if we don't look into this larger implication that has been happening and the policies that has not catered towards bringing these things together, or the cater to respect the different ideas and the different notion of nationalism and nation among the different ethnic group, if somebody works without taking these things into account for the peace building in this country, the entire process is going to be a failure if somebody doesn't understand the intrinsic nature, because nation and nationalism also plays a very important role, because as we see the resistance, be it the ethnic armed forces, some of them give it a significant role for youth. It's also part of their identity. So the conflict becomes a major, has a major impact, and this also has a major impact with the worsening of the economic scenarios, the crony capitalism which is there, the lack of expression of one's identity, one's views makes it worse. I would stop with that. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Abrupa, for that remark. Looks like me reading your chapter once again. Thanks for that. You have gone into history. You have picked up issues, and you have also placed it in the larger fault lines. So you have done a good job with what we have asked you to do. Thank you, Abrupa. Now we will move to the second presentation by Dr. Sripati. Dr. Sripati is a research fellow at the Indian Council of World Affairs. Sripati is currently in Pondicherry University for another conference, but he could still make it for us. Sripati, thank you for doing this juggling between two workshops. Yeah, the floor is yours, Sripati. We have requested all the panelists settle. Take your time. You're settled now. Sripati, can you hear us? Sripati, can you hear us? I think you have to unmute. Can you hear us? We can't hear you.
Audible?
Sripati, can you hear us? Yeah, we can hear you. Have you settled?
Hello.
We can hear you, Sripati. Are you settled?
Am I audible?
Sripati, can you hear us? You have to speak something.
Hello.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can hear you. Okay, otherwise what we will do, we'll go with Saheli now. Dr. Saheli Bose, can you hear us?
Yes, am I audible?
Yeah, we can. What we will do? Yeah.
Okay,
Is it okay if we start with you, Saheli now?
yeah,
Okay. Now let me introduce quickly Dr. Saheli Bose. She's an assistant professor and she is teaching at the Department of Political Science at the Banaras Hindu University. Dr. Bose, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours. I request you to make it in 12 minutes. Yeah, on the 10th minute, my colleague here, Anna Maria will leave a note to you. Is it okay?
So
Yeah.
is my screen visible?
It is, but partially.
Okay. Something.
I think
Okay.
the screen is not in full page. I think it is pushed
Yeah,
halfway through. We only see half the screen.
okay. Actually, there is a problem, I think, with my screen. It has stopped responding.
Can you reload? Log out and reload.
Okay. So is it possible that I continue?
So we can't see the slide, Saheli. We can see half the screen.
Yeah. Actually, it's not responding from my end. I think there's some technical glitch.
Can you restart the machine? You have opened so many things in your desktop. That's why.
Okay.
If you can close the other files and then just keep it open, maybe you'll be able to do that.
Yeah, that is what the problem is. I'm not able to actually do anything right now on my screen.
Okay, then let us go ahead without the PowerPoint. Go ahead.
Share from you, no? Go ahead.
Okay. Is it okay that if I join back later?
Maybe she can stop sharing first and then it should work.
Okay, can you stop sharing first, Sahili? Can you stop sharing?
Yeah, first. Stop participant sharing. Yeah.
What if she not?
It's okay, we'll restart it.
Yeah. Okay.
We can't, you have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Yeah. Am I audible right now?
Yes,
We
ma'am.
can hear you.
Yeah. So do I need to share it once again?
Yeah, try it now. No, it's the same.
I think so. You need to make it full screen first and then share it so that.
There's some problem, I think, with my system or something. I am not able to understand right now.
Ma'am, can you click on the,
Yeah. Dr. Bose, I think what Femi just suggested, please can you try that? Initially, without sharing, make your screen big and then share it. Okay. Just put the rest of the minimize your Zoom and others. Make your slide page big and then share it. Okay.
There's the slideshow option.
I think there is some problem on my side.
Ma'am, in at the end of the screen, near the cursor, plus minus on the
Yeah,
left,
just next to it. Yes.
this should work. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it now visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Now it's visible. Kindly go ahead. 10 minutes, 10 plus 2 minutes, Sayali.
Yeah. Sorry, very sorry for the technical glitch on my part. So this is what I intend to present: India, Myanmar, borderland, past and present. So basically, I have this scheme of discussion. Like I would be dealing something on the ideas of border, especially in the South Asian context, history and borderlands, and fencing or not fencing. Basically, to deal with the idea of border is exclusively related to territoriality. And territoriality is a way which is exclusive to state sovereignty. The state, through its exclusive command over a particular territory, creates an identity where the self disengages from other. And it is the work of the frontier, border, and borderland that defines the state. An interesting work related to borders can be traced to Malcolm Anderson, where in his work, Frontiers, Territory and State Formation in Modern World, he talks about the history of borders and track it to the Roman Empire. The Romans started practicing the demarcation of boundaries, which was due to the rising population. It was the time of Renaissance that was important for cartography, and the precision in map drawing developed. The colonial period was remarkable for its intent into border making. Thus, it was without setting a foot on the mountain and rivers of the recent Afro-Asian state that the imperial powers began to use this as a bargaining tool. Now, in context of South Asia, it was that the most of the South Asian land was undemarcated. Large part of Indian subcontinent was bordered by sea, and there was no centralized regime. No one does hear about the South Asian markers of frontier. It was during the British administration that Sir Durand and Holditch, the Survey General of India, began with their great interest in drawing of map. Curzon, Lord Curzon, the instrumental person behind partition, was also an enthusiast. Now, the Second World War generated new interest into the border, and the interest accelerated with the imperial decision to partition the subcontinent. When the Southeast Asian nations started failing to Japan, the Assam frontier assumed enormous importance as the last British outpost. The British government was not just interested about the natural frontier, but also in those people who lived on those areas. So studies were constructed and they were written down. At the time of decolonization, the only viable option was to maintain the border that the European colonial rulers had drawn, and it would be cumbersome even if the borders were redrawn. The result neglected the cultural and economic consideration as such. Now, if we look at the history of India-Myanmar border, I think the previous speaker, she had talked about the history of India-Myanmar in context. But basically, the three Anglo-Burmese war, they kind of formulated what we have as today's India-Myanmar borders. It was the Ahom Kim of Assam, whose kingdom which was weakening, and it was the Burmese aggression which resulted in closer military connection with the Britishers. The 1985, in the Third Anglo-Burmese War, the independent king of Burma, Thibaw, was defeated and deported to India. In the year 1934, the first demarcation between British India and Burma was made, and it was called as Pemberton Line, which actually was the line that was drawn between the Kubo Valley, and it was given over to Burma. So Pemberton, during the time that he was dealing with the area, had no precise idea about what he was demarcating, and he went on with the project. Later on, we find that another Britishers political agent, Colonel Johnson, he also had a boundary to lay in between Burma and Manipur. And later on, it was again the work of Colonel Maxwell, who redemarcated this line with placing of 38 pillars on ground. And this is specifically referred in 1967 agreement. So 1901, Lushaichin Hill were demarcated, and this colonial boundary was inherited by India and Myanmar. And for 1887 till 1937, Burma was part of British India. And we find that it was during this phase that there was close contact between India and Burma. Fort William in Kolkata was the center for military operation for the British annexation of Burma, to such an extent that Judson College and Rangoon College were under the University of Calcutta. So there were constant connections and exchange of ideas between the nationalists also. And some of the eminent nationalists in India, they were jailed in Rangoon, as we all know. Burma was separated in 1937, and both the countries, after they received their independence, and boundary agreement was signed, and a joint boundary commission was constituted. Now, taking into consideration the India-Myanmar borderland. So borderland is the commonplace ground for both the countries, who interpret their life differently. Traditionally, it is home to some of the ethnic groups which are divided across by the line. Before this colonial period, these ethnic groups and their homeland were never annexed or conquered. Artificial boundary divided the communities apart, which became inconsistent with their traditional limits of the region that they inhabit. The communities represent what Keating has called as the stateless nation, bounded by common culture, language, ethnicity, and socioeconomic conditions. Now we have the FMR, that is the free movement regime that was in place, which was previously that the people from both the bordering areas could cross into each other's boundary for 40 kilometer width. Later, it was reduced to 16 kilometers. And then we have the boundary agreements, land boundary agreements, the latest one being in 2018. Now, what I intend to do over here is talk about certain areas which are Longwa, Hamangbuchwa, More, and Zakhautar. So through these four area, I want to actually display or tell that how lives are interrelated. What is their lived experiences? So Longwa is a place in Nagaland, which is resident to about 7,000 people, mostly the Konyak tribe, or the headhunters. They live over there. And it has a place where the Ang, or the chief, live. So his house is basically on the border, and it is being divided by the line. So the house lies in one part of Myanmar and another part is in India. There are some schools where children from Longwa, they travel across the border and they take schooling in Myanmar for a better job. And even doctors are sent from the Myanmarese side to treat patients. Solar panels were also distributed by Myanmar government to this area. Then we have Hamang Bochua, which is in Mizoram, which is located in Longtai area, inhabited by about 2,500 people, mostly the Zakai tribe. There are no hospital facilities and the headquarter is quite far. So people have to depend on some kind of pills that are readily kept, at hand, so that if there is any kind of disease, this can be used, and these pills are supplied from the Myanmarese side. More, as we all know, is located in Manipur and the adjacent town is Tamu. So this area has substantial population of Tamil, and basically it's a cosmopolitan area located in a strategic situation. We have the ICP, that is integrated check post, and we have two gates where 1 and 2, where we have the formal and informal trading going on. Zakauthar is in Mizoram, and it is about a resident of 500 people, and it has a land customs station. So these places actually share their daily lives and their activities in their day-to-day affairs. Now the point is that the question that has cropped up is fencing or not fencing. So basically fencing would actually act as contrary to the age-old ties of transboundary border communities. Fencing could reanimate age-old ethnic discontent. There would be also a problem of acquiring land. Cost of the project, which runs across 30,000 crore as of date, and could hinder activist policy. So the way out would be a middle path where one can actually have nodes of control, boundary working group, and economic development can be the way out. I would like to stop over here. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Dr. Sageri. It was a very interesting intervention. In the last 2 days, we have been talking about Myanmar and India, Myanmar, but your presentation looked at the crucial development at the border. Thanks for bringing that up. Now let's move to the third intervention by Dr. Shripati. Shripati, are you ready? Shripati, can you hear us? Okay, let us see whether we can move to Roshni Sharma and come back to Shripati. Shripati, can you hear us? Can you call? We will check with Roshni. Okay, let us see whether Dr. Roshni, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us, Roshni. Just give a half a minute. Maybe can you just speak to Shripati? We'll come back to him later. Roshni, thank you for joining. We were hoping you will join us in Mysore. That's all right. We will go with what we have. Dr. Roshni, she teaches at the St. Joseph's University. She teaches political science. in St. Joseph's University. Her PhD is on the Rohingya refugees. Dr. Roshni, thanks. Thank you for joining us. 10 to 12 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to share the work that I have done. And let me first start by apologizing to join the session a little late. But nevertheless, I will just quickly take you through what I have done, and primarily the focus of the discussion that I thought I'll bring it on the table is with respect to the lives, the daily life experiences of the Rohingya refugees in India. Since it is a very, very crucial and burgeoning topic right now, what we have seen in the month of December that has happened in the state of Bangladesh, and the lives of the kind of scenario that the people have been through. So the focus of my presentation is primarily on the idea of statelessness and refugeehood in the neighboring countries, like especially like India. It is clearly, I hope we all are on the same page when, if I were to say that Rohingyas have been fleeing persecution, which is led by the Myanmar state security forces. And amidst the chaos that the Rohingyas are facing, the neighboring countries like India and Bangladesh seem to be the countries of hope for them. However, we at this point, we also need to know that both the countries, India and Pakistan, they are not the signatory of the UN Refugee Convention 1951 and its additional protocol 1967, which probably makes it even more difficult for the hope that they come with to continue with the same hope that seeking refuge in these two countries. However, in Bangladesh, the scenario has been Bangladesh has been hosting them, for millions of them in the state, especially the Cox's Bazar refugee camp. But the stance of Indian government and the cases that have happened of deportation and detention has spoken or speaks in volume about the kind of intervention that the Indian state has taken, or the kind of stand that the government takes in terms of looking at the Rohingyas in India. Now, being an ethnic minority from Myanmar, they flee persecution via two different, let's say, geographical areas, and they enter the Indian territory, one via the northeastern states, and one is via Bangladesh, and then they enter. So the work that I have done is primarily located, the data collection has been done in the two very important locations in Bangalore itself. So it is Dasarahalli and Thirumanahalli in the Hebbal region in Bangalore, where close to 200 Rohingya families have been staying. Now the idea of these two camps in comparison to, let's say, the refugee camps, these are semi-urban settlements. And the idea is that we speak of then the statelessness and the kind of livelihood experiences, everyday experiences that the community faces. The changing socio-political landscape in the Indian scenario has significantly impacted the living conditions of Rohingyas, rendering them as unwanted burden to the nation, where they are systematically denied access to basic amenities and humanitarian considerations. Now, there is no clear-cut data as to how many of the Rohingyas are seeking refuge in India, but as we go by the UNHCR data, and it says almost close to 23,000 refugees, Rohingya refugees, are registered with the UNHCR in India. Since referred earlier, the Indian government stance is that it does not is not a signatory to the UN Refugee Convention, and as a result of which, the time and again the government has been very clearly stating them as the illegal immigrants and trying to push them back to their country of origin, which probably put them at even much higher risk. Now, in this scenario, it becomes difficult for them to have let's say a survival. I mean, they do not even have a survival strategy to be living in the country of the country that they are seeking refuge in, and over a period of time, they are forced to experience marginality, not just only in the country of their origin, which they refer to as Burma and not Myanmar, but even further reproducing the same marginality is further reproduced even after crossing the border, and in the host country it worsens. So they are living in camps or in these semi-urban settlements where they though there is they face precarious living conditions, including violence, and the criminal, the justice system also, even though we have two articles in place under which there have been many a time cases filed in the Supreme Court, but nothing concrete comes out of, in terms of, at the end of the day, the Supreme Court also speaks of how the final call lies with the center, the union government, and that it is, if it is done according to by law in the lawful manner, then a deportation is absolutely taken into consideration. I would like to bring some of the voices from the field, and I remember one of the very women Rohingya refugee who had mentioned the hard times, the hardship that she had gone through while she was in detention center in West Bengal. She was detained because she did not have proper documents, and as Rohingyas have been listed out of the citizen category from Myanmar, they did not have any identity proof, and as a result of which they were detained and the entire family was put behind bars, which they were forced to they no communication, since they don't know the language, so no communication happened, and she expressed how she was forced to, because of the circumstances, to learn the language. So the question here is that the inhuman conditions or the vulnerability which with they come, or the hope that I spoke of earlier, the hope that they come with over a period of time actually starts fading off, and they start looking for multiple ways or different ways in which they can continue their survival here in India. As a matter of fact, they do not want to live in India. They are very clear, and all of them, the respondents, all of my respondents were very clear that they want to go back to the country of origin, Burma, provided they are treated as equal as the Burmese people. So the respect, the self-respect, they are well aware of that, and the idea that the point that they raised, that they were thrown out of it, and they were pushed out, and here the government of India, some of them were even aware of the fact that there is deportation happening, detention happening. So they had very categorically mentioned about the idea of burden sharing, which has been a very strong argument at the global level also, in the field of refugee studies and in the field of forced migration, of how the burden sharing has to happen between both the global, the South and the North. But again, the problem is that the stance that we have, the state has taken is very different from what they have to say. Now, the problems that emerged from the field were many. To highlight a few of them, language barrier is one which they which they face. However, all my respondents were, since they have taken the route of Bangladesh. So for quite a few years, they have sought refuge in Bangladesh, and therefore they were able to learn Bengali. And I'm also well familiar with the language, and therefore the communication became easier. However, the problem is, the agency that they exercise in the refuge, in the state of refuge, is that they have been able to speak or learn the language, and survival instincts or survival strategies they have catered to, be it the case of the women who was in detention center who learned the language to survive, or there were respondents from the region of Hyderabad, which has a refugee camp. Now, interesting point is that the people that I had spoken to, they did not consider themselves to be refugee. At that point also, they have the idea of who a refugee is. And for them, refugees are those who stay in camp. Since these are semi-urban settlements, they did not consider them to be refugees. And this is very interesting aspect by way of which they bring in their agency, or they try to exercise their agency. The understanding of enslavement of camps happens there. So I would just like to conclude by saying that even though the government or the Indian the state of India is not signatory to the convention, there should be certain policies, at least for SAARC countries, or in regional laws, should be made or should be formulated, so that some kind of space is given to the community, and just not being deported or pushed back to a place where they are not safe. So with this, let me just conclude, since I have completed my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Roshni. Your intervention is one of the few in the event with the field work and actually interacting with the Rohingya refugees in India. Thanks for that note. Now let's move to the last intervention by Dr. Shripati. Shripati, can you hear us now? I hope you are settled there.
Yes, sir. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. Yeah.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
I was introducing Dr. Shripati. He is a research fellow at the Indian Council of World Affairs. Currently, he is at Pondicherry University. Being a part of another ICWA Pondicherry University workshop. Thank you, Shripati, for finding time. And I understand the juggle that you are going through, but thank you again for being with us. The floor is yours. My request is 10 to 12 minutes, Shripati. On the 10th minute, Anna Maria will leave a message to you. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I will. My apologies to Dr. Subhash Chandra and his team in NIAS for juggling two events at the same time. A bit of bad management on my end of managing my calendar. And my apologies to all the participants for not turning on my camera because there's some kind of a network issue. So I just thought I'd just share my presentation. Sir, I will try to wrap up much below than less than 10 minutes. I just want to share my views on the subject before the network leaves me high and dry. With respect to the internal situation of Myanmar and its external borders, historically there are a couple of things that have to be understood vis-a-vis with Myanmar. The identity of Myanmar or Burma, the Burman identity is largely based on the Irrawaddy River and the southern part of the middle and the southern part of the river, starting from Mandalay to Yangon. And that is the Burman heartland. The rest of the country is predominantly dominated by other ethnic groups. They are mostly the hilly regions and and quite difficult to access because of the terrain. Historically, the Burman kingdoms, whether for Bagong or everyone, were on the lower part of the lower stretch of the Irrawaddy. And from Burma and Thailand, which is also quite similar, and I'm going to jump into Thailand for a second because the predominant kingdom of Thailand, from the Ayutthaya kingdom downwards, was based on the Chatopaya River. And between these two countries, the hill regions, which is where you got all the ethnic groups, used to be the ethnic regions used to be exchanged between the Irrawaddy kingdom and the Chatopaya kingdom based on whoever was more dominant. But the actual writ and administration of the region was pretty minimal in the pre-colonial era. It was more of a cartographical conquest or a territorial conquest, but it did not follow with administrative machineries put in place. Much of the administrative machinery in Thailand was on the Chatopaya River, and in the case of Myanmar, it was on the Irrawaddy. Vis-a-vis with respect to the on the Indian front, the entire India-Myanmar border region was also had a similar thing, whether it be the Ahom kingdom in Assam on the base of the Brahmaputra Valley or the Bengal Sultanate in all its various uh, facets was based on the Ganga Brahmaputra basin, and it is because of this region the entire periphery of the non-Barman area or the periphery of the Barman heartland was never administered. When the Britishers took over, they also followed a similar policy of such, wherein their focus was really on the Barman area, which was easy to administer and also served the extractive colonial policy of colonialism. And in the 1920s and 30s, there have been maps circulated by the then British authorities marking the much of the ethnic areas as no-go zone or places that are not advisable for British officials to venture, because the writ of the British state did not really extend over that. That's at one level. Second level, in the colonial administrative era, if you take in the case of India, you had a system of reforms, bringing in administration across the British administered India, not the princely states. You had the Minto-Morley reforms, you got the Morley-Chelmsford reforms, and finally you had the Government of India Act of 1935. It was only after the Government of India Act in 1935, in 1936, that then Burma, as what this country was known then, was separated from British India and made British Burma. And given the administrative reforms over here, the British did set in motion a set of nation building or putting in place a lot of administrative mechanisms and bringing in governance to much of the country. It also includes the railways, the telecommunication network, and everything that followed suit. In India also, you had the independence movement, the freedom movement, that brought in a sense of nationhood, a sense of fraternity cutting across the length and breadth, which brought in which gave a sense of nationhood at one level and was also able to bring us a common identity. In the case of Myanmar, they never had a freedom movement. If you really look at the Burmese independence, which is on 4th of Jan, it just happened because the British left India and they lost interest in the region. They walked away, they walked off from Sri Lanka, they walked off from Myanmar, because the crown jewel was India. I think one of the previous speakers had mentioned about, and in this is where the real crux of the problem comes, because the exit of Britain was preceded by the Second World War, and much of the existing political dynamics in Myanmar was the internal political shuffle within Burma during the Second World War. Initially, the Barmans, led by Aung San Suu Kyi's father, General Aung San, and his cohort, known as the 30 Comrades, were opposed to British. They thought of getting the Russian support, but then Second World War broke out. The Japanese had ran through much of Southeast Asia, and the 30 Comrades had joined in with the Japanese. But within a matter of few months and years, they realized that the Britishers were benevolent colonial masters vis-a-vis the Japanese, and they switched sides. But in the northern Myanmar, especially the Arakan, the Kachin, who were part of British Burma, were seen to be loyal to the British colonial masters and were not supportive of Japan. So this schism continued in the post independence era, wherein all non-Burmans were seen with the eye of suspicion because you were always pro-British, and that colonial hangover of being pro-British played out. The 30 comrades also did not really go in the take an effort of nation building. And Aung San Suu and General Aung San, who was seen as a father figure, was unfortunately assassinated about 6 months before independence, which also left the country without a father figure or a unifying figure. He did sign the Panglong Agreement, but he was not there. But the Panglong Agreement was not properly implemented, and the non-implementation of the Panglong, perceived non-implementation of Panglong Agreement, was the reason why the Kachins took up arms in the 1960 and 59, 58, 59, 60. And since then, the Kachin movement is supposed to be one of the world's longest continuously running insurgency. After the Kachins, others also started to pick up arms. This is the internal context. Vis-a-vis external implication of Myanmar, Myanmar is maybe one of the few countries whose internal dynamics is largely, or its internal conflict doesn't have much of an external footprint. Yes, there is overlapping of population or community, especially along the Indian border. The Nagas, the Chins, the Mizos have got fraternal ties across the border. But but these ties were not a trigger to fuel or to stoke the fire that was setting, because to Myanmar's advantage, almost all its neighbors acknowledge the British border, and Myanmar doesn't have any territorial dispute or security concerns with its neighbors. It did have a minor dispute with China, but which was resolved many decades ago on near similar coordinates as it was when Myanmar gained independence. So this is one issue. But on the external front, barring for some Chinese influence in the 70s, where they were supporting the Burmese Communist Party, which today has taken another avatar of MNDA, Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army. They are ethnic Chinese. All other groups are non-ethnic Chinese, but these groups took up arms and took the violent path because of the inherent xenophobic mentality of the Burman ethnicity, the exclusive xenophobic mentality, which has not been able to, and that mentality, for a host of reasons, there's been no wavering of that mentality, which was most evident when Aung San Suu Kyi referred to the Rohingyas as Rakhine Muslims and refusing to use the word Rohingya. And I hope most of you will recollect in 2017 when the Rohingya crisis really blew up. Aung San did pitiable little, because that is an inherent identity crisis. And one of the reasons for this is that about 55 million people population, about 55% of the population are Buddhist, Burman Buddhist, who dominate the major urban centers from Mandalay to Yangon. And that is where historically administered Burma ever existed. And the rest of them were seen as fringe areas or frontier regions that were not really governed. And that mentality has to really change, which is also quite evident when you see and in the past 15 years, when electoral democracy was introduced, with all the Myanmar characteristics attached to it. Aung San or the NLD, National League for Democracy, was not able to build a cutting across ethnic consensus. The NLD swept both the 2015 and the 2020 elections across the country, but did not reach out to the other ethnic political players, which, in my opinion, can be seen as one of the triggers for the continuing animosity between the Burman and the non-Burman. What has been the outreach to create a united front, if I may use the term? Second point, But today there's one major issue vis-a-vis Myanmar, and that is the where how this internal dynamics plays out in the external factor is the entire parallel economy in Myanmar. You've got a lot of drugs, a lot of cyber crimes, a lot of human trafficking, and a lot of gun running. All of them goes back to the northern neighbor of the northwestern neighbor of Myanmar, China. China has got a history for the past 50 years now, from the late 70s and definitely from the 80s, arming both the ethnic groups and the military. Apart from the Chinese, the other neighboring countries have been a bit more benevolent, not taking sides and not capitalize, not making a quick buck, if I can use the term, for themselves by interfering in the internal dynamics of Myanmar. And the final point which I will say is that for the external player today, which I would say is the biggest concern, is this entire criminal nexus as to where will it end, irrespective of where will it, how will it metamorphose in the future, irrespective of what is happening today and how Myanmar will look tomorrow. Whether there is a negotiated settlement or a violent settlement, at some point of time, the violence will stop. At what shape and what time, that is difficult to predict. But what is going to happen to this entire parallel economy? With these few words, I will stop. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sripati, for that note. We have 30 minutes. I think we have enough time. We'll have 2 rounds of discussions with the panelists. Before I ask the scholars here, are there any questions amongst the 4 panelists to the other panelists? Apurva, Saheli, Roshni, and Sripati, do you have any questions, input to the other 3? Yeah, Apurva, please.
Thank you so much, sir. I have a question for Dr. Bose. Dr. Bose, thank you for your input. As you look into the border and specialize in it, and you did mention about the More-Tamu equation, and I would like if you could elaborate a bit more, given the current conflict in Manipur and the hamper in the connectivity that was pre-existing in among the More-Tamu, as you rightly mentioned about the medical requirement, and I think it also involves the day-to-day requirement was getting. So how do you see in that point, and also if you could elaborate on the role of the Naga ethnic group on both the sides of the border, and when it comes to the larger Naga conflict. That is one. Thank you so much. And other question I have is for Roshni. Roshni, thank you for your input. As you have an elaborate knowledge on the Rohingya refugee and also look into the crisis per se. So in case of Bangladesh, there has been I have not per se looked into the Rohingya refugees in India. I do know about them, but I have looked from the Bangladesh perspective. In Bangladesh, there's a large of local conflict. Because more than the government apathy towards them, there's a local apathy towards them, and because of the era. And not only that, interestingly, there's also animal-human conflict that rises from the the refugees settlement in Bangladesh. Do you find similar things in India per se? And if you can elaborate on that, thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at this stage? I will come back to you for your responses later. Saheli and Roshni, any question to the other panelists? No? Okay. Now I'll take a few questions, inputs from the floor here, and then I'll come back to you. We'll do it in 2 rounds. We'll start with Kalpana Sharma and Abhijit. Be a bit louder, and then just let them know which campus you are from so that they know.
Sure. A very good afternoon. I am Kalpana Sharma. I am from Christ Deanby University, Bangalore, and I'm in final year undergraduate student. So I have several, I'll try to combine as many questions I can. So firstly, I'd like to ask Dr. Saheli Bose. how exactly do you think fencing could affect ACTI's policy? Because I have worked at the ACTI's Policy Affairs Department in Assam for quite some time. So I would like to know what exactly do you think could affect that policy due to fencing? And because from what the government's perspective is that it is trying to have it's basically saying it's for national security and national interest. Because mostly it's the Manipur tribes and the Naga tribes which are against the fencing. But again, they are the ones who are also getting benefit out of having the free movement, because that is where most of the trafficking and the drugs related crimes as well happen. And my next question is for Ms. Roshni. Why do you think India is not providing citizenship to the minority Hindu community in Myanmar? Because it's around just 2%. And despite the changes also that they've made in the CAA, the Prime Minister and the government is not agreeing to granting them citizenship. And if you could also tell us some sources to study the detention camps and the detention process that the refugees go through. Thank you.
Thank you. Viruji?
Yeah, I am Viruchi. I'm a research assistant at NIAS. My question is for Dr. Roshni. So you mentioned that Indian government should come with a policy so that Rohingya refugees are not pushed back. But if policies are favorable for refugees, how will we handle more than 1 million refugees who would be attracted to go to a destination like that? And my second question is, how do refugees in India, Rohingya refugees, manage their sustenance? Are they sponsored by Indian government?
Okay. Allah?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ala from International Relations Department. My question for Dr. Roshni. My first question talking about how Myanmar internal conflict influence its foreign policy and relations with neighboring countries, particularly when we're talking about refugees. And the second question talking about what are the main challenges faced by host countries and international community to addressing the humanitarian and political dimension of this ongoing displacement. Thank you so much.
Thank you. One more question and then come back to you. I'll request all four of you to intervene. You know, the questions need not necessarily be by one panel. Yeah.
Good afternoon, panel. My name is
No, please.
My name is Nuha and I'm a research assistant at NIAS. My question is to Dr. Roshni. Ma'am, you had spoken about how you have done this field study, and given that you have knowledge of the ground realities, can you please share what really goes on in these detention centers?
Okay. No, please.
Sir, all the presenters, you made a good presentation, wonderful. You focused on all the areas, issues, mainly Rohingya. Roshni, you focused very well. You carried the way you carried out the Rohingya issues. It was wonderful. And while talking about the Sripati sir, Dr. Sripati, sir focused on internal and external impact of border issues and Rohingya issues. And sir, what would you like to suggest for these three countries? Because three countries, mainly Rohingya issues it's a common problem of these three countries, India and Nepal and Myanmar. And what would you like to suggest, sir? Is it required to, have a dialogues, all the three countries? Is it required to have a dialogues to to come out with the effective solutions, sir?
Okay, now,
hello, am I audible, sir?
Sorry?
Hello? Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, we can hear you. I'll come back to you, Sripati. Yeah. What we'll do, we'll start in the same order. We'll start with Aparupa, Saheli, Roshni, and Sripati. You may want to be a bit brief. You all know the subject, so I don't want you to respond only to your question. Aparupa, we will start with you.
No, sir, I don't have any input.
You don't have any response. Saheli, please.
Yeah, okay. I would like to intervene in the questions which was asked by Aparupa. And then maybe I'll talk about the Act East policy. So basically, her question was related to More and Tamu. So the point over here is that More and Tamu, the adjacent towns, or the twin towns across the border, they were considered to be one of the most important aspects of border trade. Initially, border trade in this area happened on a barter system, which was exchange of goods. But later, from 2015, it was upgraded to NMF, that is the most favored nation terms, and we had a list of items that was to be traded. Uh, Initially, the trade of border trade did go up, and afterward, specifically after the coup, the border trade is almost negligible. It's not even 1%. So that's the area, the border trade that is happening, and the bordering areas between More and Tamu. So they have this India-Myanmar friendship bridge, which runs across the region, and you have shops across the bridge where the shopkeepers do keep not only the items from these two countries but also third country. And specifically with regard to the Manipur crisis, as things are concerned, it is a complicated scenario, because we have the Meiteis and the Kukis accusing each other of grabbing land and changing the demography, specifically of and taking care of resources that is available. And yeah, that's for that. And for the Look East policy and national security, it is not actually the Manipur government which has resisted. It is Nagaland and Mizoram. The most resistance have come from there. Now, if you specifically look at the Look East policies, connectivity is one of the major consideration for the economic and people to people contact. Even the land boundary agreement did talk about an connectivity aspect and how to increase the people to people contact. So in that way, national security and Act East policy, there should be some kind of compromise that needs to be there. That's what I have spoken in my last slide regarding the nodes of control and economic development. Specifically, if this areas are economically development, not as just an en route, but also taking care of the fact that this areas can also contribute, like for example, the development and promotion of agro industry and agro farming. So that way it can have an effect on the Look East policy, or rather the Act East policy. So national security, economic development, and border management, to my mind, should go hand in hand.
NIAS webinar. Adan சொன்னேனே time.
Thank you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. Roshni?
Yeah. Thank you for all your questions and the points that have been raised. To start with, yes, Pupa, the question that you had asked, there is a local apathy that is there, that is seen in the case of Bangladesh. It is also very, very prevalent in the Indian scenario. I'll just give one example and try to validate what I'm trying to say. During Corona, when Corona happened, the Tablighi Jamaat that happened was happening in the state of Delhi. The narrative that was built at that time was Corona. They were referred to as Corona bomb. The Rohingyas were referred to as Corona bomb, and there is says it for all in terms of the kind of there is no assimilation, definitely no assimilation. There is no human on the basis of humanity. Also, there is no consideration from the locals here in India. So moving ahead, the question with respect to CAA and why minority, I mean, the Hindu minority were not included. I think the stance of the government with respect to CAA has been very clear that it is only looking at the three countries which are predominantly, have a large Muslim population. And from there, taking all the categories, all the different religion except for Ahmadiyas and Muslims, and lessening their waiting period. So if it's earlier, it was 12 years, probably now they have lessened it to 7 years. That's the whole idea. And as far as why not Myanmar, I think, the reason, I mean, could be that Myanmar is not a Muslim majority region, and therefore to take Hindus from there would have been probably not in the purview of the CAA, the way the government has put up the bill. The question with respect to sources of detention, yeah, there are many sources, and had I been there in person, I would have definitely shared. But you can always, since I learned that you are from Christ, so we are not very far in Bangalore. Anytime you can be here, and I will definitely share the sources with you to read more on the topic. The question of sustenance, as far as the Rohingyas living in the state of in the city of Bengaluru and also in other places in India, they are primarily surviving on, jobs like rack pickers. So the men go out, they do rack picking, and they come back home. That is the primary income that they are into. And along with this, in Delhi, they are also, some of them have e-rickshaw. They are e-rickshaw drivers. So nothing beyond that, or not. I mean, they have very limited job. And opportunities because of the fact that they do not have identity. And as a matter of fact, the Indian government does not even consider the UNHCR refugee card to be valid. So the problem starts right from there in terms of them getting any access to any kind of job opportunity. So the scenarios of detention center, I would not be able to speak much on this. I have not been to a detention center. What I have learned from my respondents is that it's not very good a place to be in, because when you have probably you are already vulnerable and you are put behind a detention center, it only adds on to your vulnerability. So this is where I would like to rest for now. Any other questions? I
We'll
would
come
like.
back to you if there are any queries. Sripati, briefly. Sripati, anything from you at this stage?
Yes, sir. I think there's a question to. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sir. With respect to the Rohingya, I believe there's a question whether India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar should have a three-way dialogue. In my opinion, India is actually not the primary party to the Rohingya issue, because most of the Rohingyas took refuge in the Chittagong division of Bangladesh, and from there they have migrated to India for economic reasons. So at one level, you should see the Rohingya population in India not as much as distress migrant, as refugees, but hello.
Go ahead, we can hear you.
Yes, sir. At one level, they are partially refugees and partially distressed population searching for economic progress, like the Bangladesh illegal migrants into India. The primary issue is between Bangladesh and Myanmar, and now, given the internal situation in Myanmar, Myanmar has to get its own house in order. And I would just like to kind of validate one factor that in 2017, when the mass exodus of the Rohingyas took place from the Rakhine state to Bangladesh, it was the local Rakhine Buddhist who actually set the fuel, or no, set fuel to the fire. It was not as much as the Burman Buddhist state. And the Rohingya issue has got a lot of animosity at two levels. One is between the Myanmar government and the Rohingya, and second is at the ground level of the society between the Rakhine Buddhist and Rohingya. So primarily, it is an internal issue of Myanmar which has to be addressed. And once that is addressed, there is possibility of mass repatriation of the Rohingyas or partial repatriation of the Rohingyas from the Chittagong division of Bangladesh to Myanmar. And India is the third party to this. The primary party is Myanmar. The second party is between Myanmar and Bangladesh. And India happens to be the third party. Incidentally, there are also Rohingyas working in rest of Southeast Asia like Thailand and Malaysia and Indonesia. There have been instances where Rohingyas have by sea sailing through Andaman Sea, reaching Malaysia and Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, Sripati. We'll take one quick round of inputs and then get back to the panel. Saparno, a bit louder so that they can hear. Just, let them know where are you from.
I'm Shobhana Rukhi from Pondicherry University, South Asian Studies. So my question is to Aparupa. As you mentioned that youth identity is synonymous with ethnic armed organization. So if you could throw some light.
Okay. Please. Sorry, David. A bit louder.
My question, I'm Devika, I'm from St. Joseph University. My question is to Rohini ma'am. Ma'am, you mentioned and you conveyed the learnings of Bangalore, Hebbal, and how these regions are having refugees, etc. So, ma'am, I was reading a recent article where children born in India were having a lack of documentations from the and they were having lack of documents in the UNHCR card, etc. So, do you think that this would affect their education, healthcare, and access to the social services? And as a whole, for refugees, there is a lack of documentation.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Leah. I am currently an undergrad student from Christy Jayati College, Bangalore. And my question is to Apruba. You mentioned about youth and how they are a part of their identity. So how has the generational shift of resistance come, starting from the historical context to the present time? For example, did the older generation, how has the shift happened from the older generation to the younger generation? If you could shed some light on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Briefly.
So my question is to Sripati sir. As you said, India is the third party to what's happening in Myanmar and the refugees. Do you think that India is focusing it's shifting its focus to BBIN instead of looking at East and Southeast Asia?
Apruba, would you like to start? There are a couple of questions to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I will try and club because both the questions were in the similar line about youth and identity. One point that I have not emphasized while talking is that how it was also the British colonial power that also introduced the so-called the Western concept of race and ethnicity. So what was a fallout of this introduction of the Western concept that happened in Myanmar was the larger generalization of a very complex ethnic understanding, because we do know that according to the constitution there's recognized 135 ethnic community and so. But it's not as simplified as it's presented because there is ethnic community, there's sub-ethnic community, and there is also sub-ethnic community. So that's where the identity aspect comes in, because how the one identifies is very difficult in Myanmar, because it's not, a Kachin may not identify largely as a Kachin, but also identify according to their sub-ethnicity. So that does have an impact on the resistance movement, interestingly, is because that's what my question in the morning was about, the linear phase of it, because we do see the resistance movement as a one conglomerate whole, but different aspiration and different identities and is coming together for the larger cause of democracy per se, but these things also play a big role. And the shift that was questioned, interestingly, this is something I have also tried to look into. I've been talking to several Myanmarese students who are in India regarding the same. What is interesting was quite a similar pattern I found from their talk is that the the fight for democracy was previously there. There has been, the Saffron Revolution and others where previously the youth who are now in their middle age has been participating very strongly. But the current youth have seen a small phase of hope. They have seen, the democracy that the previous generation has not seen or not lived into. Many of them did come back with hope in 2015, and there was the change that the previous generation had aspired did happen to an extent in 2015. So this generation, now that they've seen what the democracy can do or feel the change that was feasible for them, I think that shift is very much evident between the previous generation, which I'm talking previous to the 2015 or even previous to 2020, 2011, between these two generations. That's what I feel. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so to cater to your question, it starts actually the entry point is of looking at whether they have access to education, healthcare, and other basic amenities. It starts because of the lack of documentation. Like I mentioned earlier, the Indian state is not a signatory, so we do not, we treat the Rohingyas as illegal immigrants. And plus, the government also does not approve of the UNHCR refugee cards. So that documentation is also not taken or considered by the government. And as a result of which, the entry point itself becomes problematic. When they don't have documents, they do not have access to, education. And as a matter of fact, however, stating that in the Bangalore region, Save the Children has been doing a wonderful job with the UNHCR Chennai office, where they are pushing it hard for at least the Rohingya children to get education. So because of the efforts that the NGO of the organization, that the children of the Rohingyas in Bangalore, and not all of them, they are having access to education. But yes, healthcare and other things remain a big time concern for the just not for Rohingyas, but other refugees as well in India. But Rohingyas, I would say, is probably doubly marginalized at present in the Indian state today.
Shripati? Shripati? Okay, I think Shripati is not there.
Hello.
Shripati, if you can hear, go ahead. There was one question to you.
Sir, can you just repeat the question, sir?
Sir, do you think that India is shifting its focus to BBIN instead of looking east and towards Southeast Asia?
Actually, no. We are our Southeast Asian Connect has got two aspects to it. Then from the fact Indonesian president was the chief guest for the Republic Day earlier in the week. And in the past 6 months, you have had the Vietnamese president, prime minister, and the Malaysian prime minister visiting India for official discussion. So, and also the Singaporean president who came a fortnight ago. So we have got, so that connect is that. The second part is the continental connect. That is where the Myanmar plays the role in the trilateral highway, India, Myanmar, Thailand trilateral highway. But that highway will get functional only when there is a degree of stability in Myanmar. BBIN is working, but again, that owing to the developments in Bangladesh as to how things will progress. But to answer your question in short, our engagement with Southeast Asia is quite robust and going from strength to strength.
Thank you, Shripati.
I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you.
So,
We got it, Shripati. Thank you so much. We'll give a big hand to the panelists. And I'll request Dr. Bharti to formally propose a thank you note to the panelists today.
Thank you, sir, for the opportunity. And thanks to all the presenters for your wonderful presentation. It was really wonderful and awesome. and all the presenters, you made a true attempt to focus on internal and internal issues, that is Rohingya and border issues, and their impact, internal and external impact on the relations of with the neighborhood. And I think really the all the research scholars and young scholars, they benefited by the by your views. Thanks once again, and thanks to all the youngsters for your patience listening. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
We'll come back at 2.
Thank you. Thank you so much.